every new Isekai anime announced for 2024, so far. Each season contains a couple of Isekai anime. While not everyone is a fan, the theme's popularity is beyond dispute, and it seems unlikely to lose steam during the coming years. Consequently, the future should be stuffed with reincarnated heroes going on wild adventures in fantasy worlds far removed from their own. Action, adventure, comedy, and romance are just a few genres associated with Isekai, and they will be represented well. The 2024 Isekai anime scene is steadily coming into focus, and plenty of new names are already confirmed to be joining the category's rank. Naturally, the year also includes sequels to juggernaut properties like Konosuba and Mushoku Tensei, but those series do not need introductions. What are all the new Isekai anime announced for 2024? Ashura. Unlike so many series, Ashura does not immediately highlight its Isekai qualities. Rather than instantly focusing on visitors from another world, the anime introduces Yuno, a magical user who is attending an academy in a world that seems to have entered a peaceful era due to the death of the Demon King. Unfortunately, that assumption proves to be false, and her city and only friend are decimated by an army of golems. On the brink of annihilation, Yuno is saved by Sudru, a strange but powerful guy who fights with a practiced sword. He is known as a visitor, people who have been summoned to this universe to act as essential heroes. Driven by a desire to have fun and fight harder opponents, Sudru shows little regard for the surrounding tragedies. More importantly, Yuno decides to tag along with the hero as she wants to see him fail. Ashura had an intriguing opening few episodes that went to some fairly grim places, but the story's scattershot approach can be overwhelming and disjointed. Heavy on action, the anime is a high-octane dark fantasy anime with an expansive roster of characters, and it will introduce them all. After completing its roll call, the Isekai anime transforms into a full-blown action epic that is pretty entertaining. My instant death ability is so overpowered, no one in this other world stands a chance against me. Based on a light novel that debuted in 2016. My instant death ability is so overpowered, no one in this other world stands a chance against me. Lives up to its title by giving its protagonist the ultimate cheat. And, the source material allows Yogiti, the male lead, to use this ability frequently and to the detriment of many other characters who are too arrogant to realize they might be outmatched. The story is largely driven by the relationship between Yogiti and Tomokika, a female student who is also Isekai'd. In this case, a whole class is sent to another world, with Yogiti and Tomokika being left to die by their schoolmates. My instant death ability is so overpowered is a pure parody that seems to not think too fondly of the Isekai genre in general. Most episodes introduce an archetype, just to kill them off a few minutes later. While repetitive, it can be entertaining. Sasaki and Peeps. Sasaki and Peeps has been a positive surprise, especially since the source material does not have a big presence in Western countries. The story follows Sasaki, a guy who has been beaten down by the corporate grind. Looking to spice things up by adopting a pet, Sasaki ends up picking a bird, Pai-chan, who is a mage from another world. More importantly, the protagonist has a talent for magic. Splitting its time between Earth and Pai-chan's world, Sasaki and Peeps throws a lot at the plate to make things work, and most of its ingredients stick. Blending humor, drama, and even a hint of political intrigue, this series is fairly ambitious for an Isekai. Tales of Wedding Rings. Tales of Wedding Rings was one of the more highly anticipated new Isekai anime of winter 2024. The seinen manga is almost a decade old by this point, and it has been relatively successful considering harems are niche. People unfamiliar with the source material might have caught a glimpse of Princess Crystal in some promotional material as she is being pushed as one of the winter season's faces. A fantasy romance with hints of action, Tales of Wedding Rings follows Haruto as he rushes to another world in pursuit of the girl of his dreams, only to realize that she has a completely different life that goes beyond his wildest imagination. The adaptation is fine, although someone will need to be a fan of harem and fantasy tropes to enjoy this one. The wrong way to use healing magic. Is there anything more awkward than being the third wheel? Yusato experiences a unique version of this phenomenon when he is accidentally summoned to another world alongside his two heroic friends. Stuck in a dangerous universe that does not want him, Yusato's only saving grace is his ability to use healing magic. However, this ends up getting him in hot water since it grabs the attention of Rose, a stern teacher who quickly sets out to whip Yusato into shape. One of the better Isekai anime of winter 2024, The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic is generally a joy to watch. It produced some of the season's biggest laughs, all the while granting its protagonist plenty of opportunities to grow. That said, the anime's second half lost some steam due to the focus shifting towards action. Fluffy Paradise. Not every Isekai anime focuses on action, adventure, and romance. Sometimes, the goal of visiting another world is to discover peace of mind. Fluffy Paradise is a, largely, slow life story about an overworked protagonist who reincarnates as a girl in a fantasy world. As she loves animals, she requests an ability that allows her to communicate with them, and she sets out to befriend and pet them all. While generally leaning into relaxing slice-of-life territory, Fluffy Paradise does suggest some of the kingdom's rulers are less than savory. Consequently, the anime is not warm and fuzzy all the time, although those adjectives are accurate for most of the show's scenes. Villainous level 99, I may be the hidden boss but I'm not the demon lord. Villainous Isekai anime have become commonplace in recent years, which is hardly surprising since the trend took over the light novel scene in the 2010s. Nowadays, every season seems to include at least one show that fits this subgenre, and Villainous level 99 fills that quota for winter 2024. In a somewhat nice twist, the protagonist is reincarnated as an Atome Game's secret boss rather than its final villain. Consequently, she is very powerful, and she is also mistaken for the Demon Lord due to having black hair. Villainous level 99 has all the hallmarks associated with this type of story, despite the neat twist to the premise. Set predominantly in an academy and featuring a protagonist who simply wants to lead a peaceful life, the anime is predictable but not boring. Yumi Iladolkna's deadpan delivery brings humor and levity to most situations, and her over-the-top demonstrations are consistently memorable. The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash. Based on a novel that has already been adapted into a manga, The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash is another slow life story that goes against the Isekai genre's tendency to rely on OP protagonists. Ivy is reincarnated into a world where power is determined by skills. Unfortunately, she is only a tamer, which causes her to be shunned by her family. After losing the only person who cared about her, Ivy heads out on her own and eventually befriends a slime. The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash is a great pick for anyone looking for an Isekai featuring a vulnerable protagonist who has to use her limited skills and resources to survive in a cutthroat world. While not lacking in intense moments, the story has many slice-of-life sequences. Also, as the series does not particularly highlight Ivy's Isekai origins, it could easily pass for a traditional fantasy. Isekai Onsen Paradise. Arguably the most obscure and unknown Isekai anime of winter 2024, Mitu Isekai no Yukai Takuki is all about hot springs. Yashizu Yukawa loves nothing more than soaking in an onsen's natural heat, to the point of dedicating his life to exploring hot springs scattered around Japan. Sadly, he stumbles off a cliff and meets a gruesome end, only to be revived in a fantasy world that caters to his passion. This probably will not come as a big surprise, but Mitu has quite a bit of fan service. It is an Isekai anime about soaking in a hot spring, and Yashizu will not be doing it alone. Remonster. Isekai is so oversaturated with repetitive content nowadays that it is always exciting when a show with a relatively unique premise comes around. Monster can scratch that itch to an extent since it shakes things up by revolving around a protagonist who reincarnates as a goblin, a neat ideal considering these monsters tend not to be depicted favorably in most fantasy stories. After having his life forcefully taken, Gobru is given a new start as a goblin in a new world. But who is he, and how will he take on this journey? Similar to the source material, Monster is unapologetically a dark fantasy with a main character who is not exactly likable, even if the story presents him as a more noble version of a goblin, ogre. By eating monsters, Ru gains their skills, an ability that quickly makes him overpowered compared to his brethren. Before long, the protagonist becomes basically a king who is way more powerful than both his allies and enemies. Naturally, this paves the way to a harem that consists of Ru, female goblins, and human women who started as captives. The latter might be a sticking point for many viewers. A salad bowl of eccentrics. A rare reverse Isekai, a salad bowl of eccentrics follows two girls, a princess and her knight, who escape to Earth to avoid certain death. Once there, Sarah, princess, befriends a private detective, while Livia, knight, becomes homeless and then evolves into a cult's unwitting savior. It is also very silly and very Hinamatsuri, two descriptors that are 100% positive. A salad bowl of eccentrics is just plain old funny. Livia's plot threads have stolen the show so far, despite the knight herself being somewhat bland as a character. Sarah and Susuke, detective, have pretty good banter as well, and they develop a pseudo-father-daughter dynamic that is quite wholesome. As a reincarnated aristocrat, I'll use my appraisal skill to rise in the world. This Isekai anime follows a salaryman who reincarnates as the son of a noble family with a talent for analyzing people's abilities. Using this skill, the protagonist seeks to make a positive impact in a world that seems on the verge of a war. As a reincarnated aristocrat, I'll use my appraisal skill to rise in the world. Earns points for granting its main character a fairly unique ability that sets him apart from the many powerful leads that dominate the Isekai world. The rest of the show is serviceable, and it is nice to follow a protagonist who is trying to surround themselves with capable allies rather than just steamrolling everything themselves. Chillin' in another world with level 2 super cheat powers. If it is not obvious by now, the spring 2024 season's new Isekai anime are mostly middle of the road, and the fact they are airing alongside a few of the theme's biggest returning names has not helped matters. Next to Mushoku Tensei and Konosuba, most shows would struggle to have their voices heard. Except for a salad bowl of eccentrics, Chillin' in another world with level 2 super cheat powers is arguably the season's best newcomer, an achievement that mostly comes down to its co-leads, Fleo and Fenris. Originating from an alternate world that has rampant discrimination between races, Banaza is summoned to a new realm by a kingdom in desperate need of fighters. However, as he seems powerless, the protagonist is sent to his death. Fortunately, he manages to level up, which gives him infinite stats and instantly makes him the most powerful Isekai MC of the spring 2024 anime season. Also, he defeats and marries a demon named Fenris, starting a cute and endearing relationship that is mostly free of stress. Although not devoid of action, Chillin' in another world with level 2 super cheat powers tells a primarily slow life story about romance and friendship. The New Gate. The New Gate has an interesting premise, or at least a fun twist on the standard Isekai formula. The story starts with the protagonist, Shin, already stuck in a deadly game, and he is about to defeat the final boss to free himself and his fellow players. However, this triumph just sends him into the game's future, although he is still incredibly powerful. There, Shin sets out to create a life for himself. The New Gate anime features an MMO-style world similar to iconic titles in the Isekai medium, and these are some of the best picks. The source material focuses heavily on world building, and it leans into slice-of-life territory since Shin is so overpowered that he is rarely challenged. So far, the adaptation has been generally fine, although it is arguably spring 2024's most forgettable series. That perspective can be credited to Shin, who mostly just goes with the flow and rarely has big reactions to his surroundings. Despite being sent 500 years into the future, the protagonist is still relatively comfortable with this world and is rarely surprised by anything. Consequently, the story lacks tension, which is not always a terrible thing. The strongest magician in the Demon Lord's army was a human. The strongest magician in the Demon Lord's army was a human has enjoyed success in a few mediums, with the novel and light novel spawning a 2019 manga that is still producing new content. The anime adaptation should follow suit, although Studio A-Cat's projects have generally been a mixed bag. The company's strongest show yet was 2022's She Professed Herself Pupil of the Wise Man, an inoffensive but forgettable Isekai. The strongest magician in the Demon Lord's army was a human follows an overpowered human masquerading as a prominent demon soldier. The premise is fairly interesting. Crunchyroll has the strongest magician in the Demon Lord's army was a human release date set to June 26, 2024, even though most other sources state July 3. Failure frame. I became the strongest and annihilated everything with low-level spells. With a starting point reminiscent of Arafureta and my instant death ability, Failure Frame, I became the strongest and annihilated everything with low-level spells seems set to be a run-of-the-mill Isekai anime, which can be fun. A goddess summons a full class of students to her world, casting them as heroes. Unfortunately, Mimori's awakened abilities are so weak that he is deemed useless. Furthermore, the deity sends the teenager to a dangerous dungeon to kill him. However, shocking nobody even slightly familiar with Isekai tropes, Mimori learns his unorthodox powers make him incredibly strong. Also, he forms a partnership with an elf. Failure frame. I became the strongest and annihilated everything with low-level spells will probably not entertain people who do not love Isekai trash. A term that is not meant to be derogatory in this context. It will probably be dumb but mindlessly amusing. Quality assurance in another world. While not the most hyped-up Isekai anime of summer 2024, Quality Assurance in Another World has the potential to be the season's nicest surprise. In a fun little twist on the formula, the story follows a guy, Haga, who works as a debugger in a realistic fantasy MMO. His job requires him to double-check and test everything to catch any bugs, and he sends back his findings via a teleporter. However, he is also living alongside NPCs who have no idea they are part of a game, which creates issues when he strikes up a friendship with a local girl. The manga is funny and entertaining, so hopefully the adaptation will follow suit. Studio Palette and 100 Studio are both very young companies, but the former has a couple of good Isekai anime under its belt. The world's finest assassin gets reincarnated in another world as an aristocrat and kamikatsu. Dahlia in Bloom, crafting a fresh start with magical tools. A possible candidate for one of the year's most pleasant releases, Dahlia in Bloom might not have the excitement factor of some other upcoming Isekai anime, but it could be something special. The light novel follows a woman who reincarnates in a fantasy world after, naturally, being overworked. After a series of horrible events send her life into a spiral, she decides to focus on developing magical tools, a craft she happens to be passionate about. Dahlia in Bloom blends slice of life, fantasy, and romance well, and the anime will hopefully capture the light novel's magic. Suicide Squad Isekai. Undoubtedly the theme's most bizarre 2024 series, Suicide Squad Isekai teleports a few iconic DC characters to a fantasy world. As is tradition, Harley Quinn, Deadshot, and the rest of the villains are saddled with time-sensitive bombs, forcing them to find a way home before they lose their heads. Anime may be a new look for the Suicide Squad, but the lineup should be familiar to DC fans. Putting aside the whole DC element, the story's core driving force is also unique. Most Isekai protagonists barely acknowledge their former lives, let alone actively try to return home. Wit Studios' resume is filled with great shows, and Suicide Squad Isekai has the potential to be among the best of them. A journey through another world, raising kids while adventuring. A journey through another world, raising kids while adventuring should be a good slow life cozy option, a perfect series to watch on a summer afternoon. The manga's twist is that it saddles the male protagonist with 2 children almost instantly, pushing him into a parental role. While most Isekai stories avoid isolating their main characters, very few have gone down the parent route. In fact, the theme is more likely to cast its protagonist as a child rather than a father or mother. A journey through another world should be a nice change of pace. Head start at birth. Well, this anime's announcement came out of nowhere. While some press material made its way online, as far as research could uncover, Head Start at Birth does not even seem to have a trailer, at least, not one available in Western circles. At the moment, this series seems likely to remain exclusive to the Japanese market and not announce an international streaming platform, especially since it consists of 5-minute shorts rather than full episodes. Amaka's story started life as a digital novel, before eventually earning a manga adaptation. Head Start at Birth is about Lilia, an Isekai girl born with full knowledge of her previous life. Basically, she is similar to Mushoku Tensei's Rudy, in the sense they are both adults who reincarnate as babies with their developed minds along for the ride. Lilia quickly takes advantage of her situation to ensure she is well ahead of the curve. The anime might be fine, but one of the story's early beats involves 5-year-old Lilia becoming engaged to the much older Elrich. Plus-sized elf. Summer 2024's solitary reverse Isekai anime, Plus-sized elf does not hide what it is trying to be. The story follows Nao, a massage therapist who takes it upon himself to motivate Irafuda, an elf, to lose weight and stay away from Earth's fast food. As traveling back to her world requires remaining the same weight as when she arrived, Irafuda is in a bit of a tough spot. However, Japan's food is simply too delicious to resist. Plus-sized elf is an ecchi comedy with a very specific type of fan service. Honestly, it is nice to see different body types represented by anime. No longer allowed in another world. No longer allowed in another world could prove to be one of the more intriguing 2024 Isekai anime. Based on a fairly popular manga, the series will follow Osamu Dazai, a famous author who is sent to another world just before his real-life death. Driven by a desire to bring his life to an end, Dazai stumbles from scenario to scenario, somehow surviving in the process. The Isekai subgenre of anime and manga has quite a lot of protagonists to pull from, but only a good handful of them are truly memorable. Blending comedy, parody, and fantasy, no longer allowed in another world should be an interesting watch thanks to featuring a wildly different protagonist than tends to be the norm for these types of stories. In the manga, the humor can get repetitive, but it could translate well into anime. I'll become a villainess that will go down in history. A woman would love nothing more than to escape her life and become Alicia, the villainess of an at-home game. Fortunately, that dream becomes a reality when she is killed in an accident and finds herself inhabiting Alicia's body. Looking to make the most of her new villainous role, the protagonist embraces the opportunity, all the while keeping in mind that Alicia's destiny is anything but pleasant. Another at-home villainous story, I'll become a villainess that will go down in history, should be a respectable addition to this subgenre. The light novel and its manga adaptation are both well liked, even if they are not big names outside of Japan. Loner Life in Another World. Loner Life in Another World is a prime contender to be among the more divisive Isekai anime of the year, which is not a bad thing. With so many series playing things safe, any story willing to take risks is welcoming, regardless of whether they pay off. The light novel starts with the typical class sent to another world and the main character gains terrible powers premise. The difference here is that the protagonist, Haruka, is purposefully depicted as unlikable and somewhat annoying. At the very least, he does not seem to care all that much about other people. Loner Life in Another World is a full-blown comedy that leans into its MC's eccentricities, and the humor will always be subjective. 2024 Isekai anime sequels. Although 2024 has plenty of exciting new Isekai anime, the year has also announced a few sequels, most of which will garner more attention than the newcomers to the theme. The selection is quite slim at the moment, but it should grow as the months roll by. While new shows are not outright ignored, they tend to be overshadowed by returning properties, particularly in the Isekai sphere. There is also a good reason for that. The shows that turn sequels tend to be better than the average Isekai anime. Tsukimaki Moonlit Fantasy Season 2. Konosuba, God's Blessing on This Wonderful World. 3. Mushoku Tensei, Jobless Reincarnation Season 2 Part 2. That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime Season 3. Arafureta, From Commonplace to World's Strongest Season 3. ReZero Starting Life in Another World Season 3. Seirai Gensuki, Spirit Chronicles Season 2. Demon Lord, Retry. Argaku. Overlord Movie 3, Sei Ukokuhen.
Hello. Thank you for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for future content, comment and let me know. I know many are not comfortable with AI art. But, I am saving to gather supplies to delve into other art styles. It will take time. But, I am hoping to get into resin, woodworking, and metalworking. All I ask, please enjoy my videos.